stand our ground. We won't be pushed around. We must keep you from putting our kids in the ground, so we can't stand down. No, we won't back down. We won't back down, baby. There ain't no easy way out. We can't stand down, brother. So we'll stand our ground. And no, we won't back down. 'Cause we know what's right. And we got plenty of fight. And if you think you're gonna keep pushing us around, well, you'll lose that crown. 'Cause we won't back down. We won't back down, baby. There ain't no easy way out. We can't back down, brother. We've gotta stand our ground. And no, we won't back down. You know, it's pretty clear. If these lunatics think they have the right to strip us of our rights of self-defense, and if they're willing to do that, what else are they willing to do? We won't back down, baby. There ain't no easy way out. We can't back down, brother. No, we won't back down. Back down, baby. There ain't no easy way out. We can't back down, brother. We've gotta stand our ground. So we won't back down. No, we won't back down. Virginians, you won't fight this fight alone.
Good evening, everybody. Happy Sunday to you. First meeting in June. We also have an in-person meeting coming up on the 20th at XCal in Ashburn. So looking forward to that in-person meeting. Philip Van Cleve is here with us. Let us know in the chat where you're tuning in from. I see a bunch of people from around the state. Haven't really looked at all of them yet. We also are hoping to be joined tonight by Tom Grieve. I hope he got the link that I sent him. Anyway, Philip, do you want to take it from here, or do you want me
Well,
to?
I'll try. So everybody knows, I've got laryngitis. So if I sound like a frog, that's what that is. Fun and
Right.
games.
Yeah.
This morning, I couldn't even. I could only whisper, nothing else. At least now I can project a little bit. But yeah, looking forward to Tom coming on. And speaking about meetings, Tyler Wenrich, the young gentleman that was jailed in Grand Turk for having two little 9mm rounds in his luggage. He, as you know from a previous alert, he got freed. He had to pay $9,000, and they gave him time served, which is about 2 or 3 weeks in jail. And then he's now back with his family, and he said he'd be more than happy to come to a VCDL meeting to talk about the experience and maybe make sure this doesn't happen to anybody else. So I'm going to probably be booking a VCDL meeting in the Richmond area for that. But I'll keep apprised what exactly we're going to do. But he was very grateful. He felt that um, the actions of VCDL members doing all that they did, contacting people, and even making donations to help him out, he felt like that absolutely really helped his case, and is extremely grateful to all of you that stepped forward to try to help.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people contacted the tourism board in Turks and Caicos, and also contacted the cruise lines. and said that if something wasn't done to correct the situation, they wouldn't be traveling there or using the cruise line. So that kind of pressure on a community that depends on tourism for their economy, that puts an awful lot of pressure on them. So I'm sure it did have a huge effect.
Yeah, I think so too. When people come together, there's a lot of it's amazing all the things that you can accomplish.
Yeah, it just
So
shows that never give up hope. Working together as a team, the chorus is far more effective than individual voices.
and a
Solos are good, but a chorus is uh, the harmony just works fantastically.
and just for those that don't remember, he was facing 12 years mandatory. Uh, and so I mean, you talk about life changing. A young man with a young child. He would have missed her entire major part of her growing up. So it was a big deal, and I'm really glad that worked out.
Yep.
Yeah,
Michael Dalton says wallets
yeah,
talk louder than public relations. Yeah,
yeah,
they do sometimes, and it's sad, but and it honestly it takes both because um, that's a big part of public relations is conveying the message effectively. So um, yeah, so I see we have Angela Akers on here. Angela does a lot of work down in Christiansburg. They have the Second Monday Constitution group, I believe, is the one that she runs down there in Christiansburg. Very active in the Second Amendment community. Uh, and Michael says everybody else is on YouTube rather than Facebook, so he moved. Yeah. Yeah, we do broadcast to both. Sadly, Facebook has made it next to impossible for us to broadcast to the group, so we can only broadcast to the page, at least easily. That we could probably jump through a few more hoops and broadcast to the group, but I would have to set it up every single time and just immediately before the broadcast. So, um, that we do it through the page and through YouTube for now. So,
yeah,
Philip, that was also great news that the temporary restraining order on the ATF case down in Texas was extended for
yeah.
VCDL members, GOA members, Tennessee Firearms Association members.
Right. And when they extend something like that, it's with the thought that they're going to have the case heard formally to make an actual final decision by that extension date. And if that date comes up and they still haven't been able to schedule a court case or the judge isn't quite ready, then they extend it again. And they'll keep extending it until they actually have the court hearing where the judge will either change his mind. I think that's highly unlikely, or will strike down the regulation as unconstitutional. Put some kind of a permanent stay on it while it gets appealed. So it's how it's going to work exactly. We just don't know yet. But so there could be more extensions. It could be resolved, or there could be some other stuff going on. We're just going to have to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me too when I think it was the pistol brace injunction was first issued. They made it so that it only covered current members of GOA and the other organizations that were involved there. So people that joined after the injunction were not covered by that injunction until they made it nationwide. However, in this particular case, the judge did not do that. He just said members. He did not say current members. So
Right.
people that join VCDL or Gun Owners of America or Tennessee Firearms Association after this temporary restraining order was put into place are covered by that temporary restraining order. And of course, people in Texas are also covered, residents of Texas.
Right, because Texas was one of the main people and also was part of that lawsuit.
Yeah, and for those that are not familiar with the case, VCDL, Gun Owners of America, Tennessee Firearms Owners Association, three other state organizations, and the state of Texas filed suit against the ATF, challenging the rule where they redefined what engaged in a business of selling firearms is. And their new rule that went into effect on the mid June. I don't remember the exact date, but that new rule made it so that if you keep the receipts from where you bought a gun and then you sell that gun, they could say that you were doing it with the intent to make a profit, even if you didn't make a profit. And even if you sold it to a licensed FFL or you went to an FFL and the other person went through the background check, you could still be prosecuted as being engaged in the business of selling firearms and not getting the license to sell the firearms. So it's one of those gotcha rules that there were just so many ways that they could snag people up and prosecute them on this. It pretty much made almost everybody that sold their private property um, breaking the law and sudden felons.
Yeah,
So,
they made it purposely very vague,
mhm.
and so that if they really wanted to come after you, they could pretty much make up your crime right on the spot kind of thing because
Mhm.
it was so vague. And that in itself should be unconstitutional and may well be part of what gets struck down.
Right,
But
and that
it's
is
there.
unconstitutional.
Yeah, and
So,
who wants to have to defend that if they don't have to? No, going to court over this stuff is could be rough. You'd be sitting in jail for a while it gets sorted out. So we
right,
really need to knock this down.
you could be sent to jail, you could be fined tens of thousands of dollars. You
Lose your gun
could,
rights.
even if you're not sent to jail and the fines are not until after you're convicted, you can spend tens of thousands of dollars defending yourself in this particular case. So um, it is it's a terrible, terrible, terrible rule or redefinition that they put into place. And even though it's a national issue and not a state issue, VCDL just couldn't let that stand because it affects all of our members. It affects all gun owners everywhere. So um, we felt it was really important to join into that lawsuit.
Yeah, we also, of course, have the lawsuit in Winchester, Virginia, dealing with the parking garage being considered a sensitive place. Winchester's ordinance made it illegal to even carry a parking garage if it was owned by the city. So we're suing them on that. I've been waiting to put it on VA alert until we actually had the judge's order. But basically, what happened was the hearing was last week, and Winchester preemptively took the signs down out of their garages, told the judge that they would not be enforcing their no guns in government buildings in parking lots owned by the city. And the judge accepted that because if he had done a restraining order, it would have been the same. So he said, well, all right, we don't really need a restraining order if you're voluntarily doing this, but it's going to be that the order would be from the judge. We haven't gotten that yet, but the order would then spell that out from the judge's point of view that thou shalt not enforce this or put up signs until we've heard the full case in court. So the full case in court is not come up yet. But for now, the signs are down. They told the judge, and there should be an order we should get a copy of any time that says they will not be enforcing it. This is part of a movement by us to start stripping away the government buildings that are not sensitive, which is almost all of them. There's very few that are sensitive. And so we had to start somewhere. So we started with some very low hanging fruit. And that low hanging fruit was garages, of all things. They show you how crazy these gun control people are, how extreme they are in what they're doing. And on the 11th, which is Tuesday, I believe is the date, um, our Roanoke City case is going to come up for, I think they're going to be looking at a potential injunction by the judge. Now, Roanoke City is another one that kind of did a preemptive thing by taking down, not putting signs up and not enforcing their ordinance that would have allowed them to ban guns at permitted events. So that they preemptively took that down, but they also said that they could put it back up any time if they wanted to. So therefore, we're hoping the judge will understand it. Well, that's not good enough. We need to have something permanent so they cannot do it again, period. And we don't want to
Right.
play the game up. We sue them. They drop the signs, drop the lawsuit. They put the signs back up. Now we got to sue them again. Not going to play that game.
Right. And as long as the law is on the books, then it can be, even if they say, "Oh, well, we're not going to enforce that," it it's still on the books. It's still the intent there and the ability. So
Yeah, and a
that's
confused police officer might go, well, I'm
right.
going to arrest you because here's the thing on the books. And you can tell them, well, but it's not supposed to be enforced. Well, I don't know that. I see it on the books. You're in this garage, so I'm going to throw you in jail.
Right. Right. So we do have a couple of people asking how much is it to join. Memberships start at $25 a year. We also have a family membership where the first person in a household is $25, and each additional person in that same household is $15 more. And then we have life members for $1,000. That's a very elite group of people. And Scott Naring is asking, is there a Texas Citizens Defense League? Philip, do you know if there's a Texas gun rights organization?
Well, yeah, they have the Texas Rifle and Pistol Association. And I want to say that somebody was looking at starting a Texas Citizens Defense League, but to my knowledge, that's not in place. It's amazing for a state that like that. They have almost no gun rights organizations. But part of the problem is how big that state is. If they held a meeting in Austin, for example, some people would have to drive 6, 7 hours to get there. So it's a huge state. But no, I don't know of one, and they definitely need to keep a lookout because they're being invaded from California people, and as well as an invasion from across the border. So yeah, they're gonna need to keep their eyes open. No place is safe right now. These gun control organizations have a lot of money coming from these rich guys that want to be socialists, communists, and so yeah, every state's feeling some pressure. Now, there
Well,
was a time in Virginia where we'd never have guessed we'd be where we are now. And for
mhm.
those in other states, I suggest there's a lesson there for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The people in Virginia used to say, we'll never see major gun control in Virginia. And then, our position was you're only ever one election away from major gun control. And then in 2019, the elections went south or north, as the case may be. And Bloomberg dumped a lot of money into Virginia, and the anti-rights faction got control of the House, the Senate, the lieutenant governor, the governor, and the attorney general. And all of a sudden, we were staring at the very real threat that there was major gun control coming, and some of it made it through. So now we've got several lawsuits fighting the gun control that passed in 2020 and a little bit more in 2021. We were able to stop most of it thanks to all of you guys for showing up for Lobby Day in 2020. But we need to have that kind of presence all the time. And especially when things are going our way, we need to keep the pressure on, because when the pendulum is swinging your way, if you give it that little extra push, it's much easier to gain ground when you're already headed downhill and you have that momentum than it is to climb a big hill. So you can never let your guard down. There's always evil out there. There's always Bloombergs or Soroses that are pumping money trying to turn states to anti-freedom places they can control. So we can never, ever, ever let our guard down.
No, you can't. It never ends. It's like you're swimming in the ocean and there's always going to be sharks out there.
Right.
And you can never assume there aren't any sharks around you. There are, and you need to be aware of that.
Yeah. So Angela Akers is saying that unconstitutional gun bills are being pushed everywhere, and this year in Virginia was unreal. Absolutely, 38 bad gun bills made it out of the General Assembly. That, well, actually 40 bad gun bills. Two of them got changed by the governor to neutralize them, and 38 were vetoed. So um, the, it was a record number that Philip told me one day. He called me up. He said there's this news article saying that the governor has vetoed a record number of bills. And I said, well, if they hadn't put a record number of bad bills out of the General Assembly, he wouldn't have had to veto all of those bills. So, put the shoe on the foot that it fits.
Absolutely, yeah. We've never seen. The most I'd ever seen was maybe 5 bills on the governor's desk.
Right.
This is eight times that many, and every one of them aimed at people like you and me and everybody out there.
And they made no secret of it.
Oh.
I mean, what's his name? I've got a mental block. I can't remember his name. I can see his face. Stood up there. He had put in a bill that if you left your gun in your car and somebody saw it and broke into your car, you could be fined $500 and your car towed with the gun in it to the impound lot where things are stolen all the time. And one of the senators, Marsden, yes, thank you. One of the senators on the committee asked him, well, why didn't you say all guns? Why does it just handguns? And he said, oh, well, I like hunters. And I about fell on the floor. I was, wait, what? Yeah, it's just people that carry pistols you don't like? So,
or BB guns. He doesn't like BB guns either.
Right, right. So, I mean, it's absolutely blatant, the bias, the prejudice, the hatred that we see from these people. And sitting in the committee meetings, it is sheer torture a lot of times. I do really miss, though, when last year, not this past year, but the year before, when we would go to the House public safety meetings, and Nick Freitas was the chair, and he would come up with some real zingers in his comments from time to time, and Philip and I would sit there, and under our breath we'd be going, yes. So, yeah, he cut Helmer off at the knees one day.
That doesn't take much.
Yeah.
But yeah, but yeah, I miss those days a lot.
I do too.
We're stuck with what we've got for now.
Yeah, we are.
Yesterday, I went to the VCDL Roanoke Rifle and Revolver Club match. This is a benefit match that brings a fair amount of money to VCDL. I forget if we had I think 60 people shooting in the match, something like that, maybe a little more. And it was a blast. It always is. If you've never done one of those, it's an IDPA type match where you've got, in this case, 6 stages every year, and each stage is different. You're doing different things. One stage, for example, you have to engage targets near to far, and they're spread around. And some of them are holding a don't shoot target in front of them or near them, so you can't hit the don't shoot because that would be like a hostage. And then on one of them, you hit a steel plate when you've done all the paper targets, and then a swinger starts swinging. So you get for a brief interval, you get to see the target, then it's hidden. You see it, it's hidden. You got to try and hit it, like 3 times while it's doing that. So they just have all this stuff, and it was a beautiful day, absolutely beautiful day out there. And so that was a real success. I think it really turned out well. Everybody had a good time, and we do it every year. So if you've never done that, I drove 3 hours to be out there, and it was well worth it. So you might consider that next year if you've never done, especially if you've never done IDPA. If all you've done is shoot at stationary paper targets all the time, getting out and doing something like this, really is an eye opener, and it helps you with what could potentially be a real world situation down the road. For example, shooting and moving, drawing from the holster while doing that, and so forth. So anyhow, I think that was fun. We had some great volunteers out there that stayed at the VCDL table. They didn't get to shoot, but they made sure they were cooking the hot dogs and selling raffle tickets. All that stuff was going on. And we had uh, Nat. Um, Nat's our gun show coordinator uh, out in the southwestern part of Virginia. He helped organize that this year, and really, really appreciate that. We had like 5 guys there, all doing a good job.
So that was Roanoke Revolver Rifle and
Owner
Revolver and Rifle Club.
club. Mhm.
Um, yeah, and they put that on every single year. So you might want to check them out if you live in that area. And I put a link in the comments for the IDPA website. You can go and check out that sport. If you've never done it, it is so much fun. A real adrenaline rush if you've never done it before. The um, the stages simulate self-defense situations, and the concept is you're supposed to draw from concealment. You're supposed to use guns that you carry every day or would carry every day, and you go into each stage blind. So you really don't know what it is that you're going to do until you go up to the stage and get the briefing. And they may say, okay, when the buzzer sounds, you drop the bag of groceries that you're carrying, draw the gun, go around the corner, and eliminate the threat. And you're supposed to shoot the closest target first, or if you're using um, cover, like shooting from behind cover, you pie the targets. You don't go out and shoot so that you're exposed to 3 different targets without shooting the first one you see. Different rules like that. And it's a timed event. Some of the stages are limited to a certain number of rounds, or you may have to have like 5 in your first magazine and then reload from slide lock, or you may have to reload from retention behind cover. There's different things that you practice, and all of which are useful if you are in a real self defense situation. So,
Yeah, they force you to reload in a
mhm,
lot of those. So if you're not used to it, you get a lot of practice
right.
reloading.
And low time wins, and but accuracy counts too. Sometimes
Yeah,
it pays to well, most of the time it pays to take your time fast enough that you hit, because if you're outside of the zero ring, it adds time to your score. So just an absolute ton of fun, and worth exploring for anybody, especially somebody that carries for self-defense. So
Yeah, and
Check out the IDPA.
and again, you got the camaraderie. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
anytime I go somewhere where gun owners are doing stuff like this, it's always fun. I've never had a bad experience. It's
Right.
always been fun. Everybody's great to talk to. A lot of shared interests.
Mm-hmm.
Just for that alone, it's worth just being there, just to be around some of the nicest people you'd ever want to meet.
Yeah, and if you're not in the Roanoke area, there's an IDPA match at Ravenna Rifle and Pistol Club in Charlottesville. There's one at Cavalier Rifle and Pistol Club in Montpelier. I think they still do it at Black Creek in Mechanicsville. And I'm sure there's some down in Virginia Beach and Northern Virginia as well. So all of the different matches and clubs are listed on the IDPA website, and you can go and watch a match and talk to people about how it's done. And I let you shoot your first match without joining IDPA, but it's not expensive to join, and it
Well, there's
supports the organization.
The VCDL match. You don't have to join at all. The
Right,
IDP, but it wouldn't hurt to do that, I guess, and get formally put in a category where your master shooting. Uh,
right. And there's a lot
uh,
more women that shoot IDPA now. When I was shooting it way back in my younger years, there were very few women. A lot of times I was the only one at a match, but now there's quite a few more women that are involved in it as well.
yeah, and so yeah, that was so. Again, before I forget, I wanted to thank Nat Weigel and also Ken Modica. He's another one that's a real go-getter out in the southwestern part of Virginia, and he's very active in this thing every year, doing a lot of the hard work, trying to go to stores and get donations to give to the shooters and stuff. But yeah, he was there and helped with cooking and everything. So he's been in the thing a long time. Um, and we're uh, unfortunately, uh, one of our board. Well, trying to decide how to put this. Anyhow, Al Steed, his health is not doing very good right now, so he wasn't at this match like he usually is, and we're a little worried that things are not doing really well for him and his health. He's had problems for years, but he stepped through the problems, and he was still there for VCDL, even with a lot of health issues he had. When he was in the military, he was exposed to Agent Orange, and man, that stuff was really wicked. And a lot of people exposed to it didn't live to be anywhere near as old as Al. But yeah, so if you want to say a prayer for Al Steed, if you know him, that would be a good idea about this time.
Yes, definitely keep him in your prayers if you're a praying person. And yeah, Al was on served on the VCDL board for many, many years, and he served as the Roanoke and Salem gun show coordinator for, oh gosh, decades. um, and he was so active in the Southwest Virginia area. He was the one that approached the Roanoke Rifle and Revolver Club and Safe Side Tactical, and really got a lot of involvement down in the Southwest Virginia area. Organized a picnic every year for VCDL members in Southwest Virginia. I just did so much, uh, and we really hope that he pulls through this and recovers from the troubles he's going through. So, and I
Absolutely.
see Jill McDaniels has joined us online. She's our Academy director. Um, she had some family stuff today, so she's not joining us on the live stream, but she's joined us in the chat. So um, Jill has been really active. Also, she's working on putting together a um, first aid kit, and we're looking at the possibility of offering maybe some first aid courses that to our members and things like that. So watch for the academy to be doing some great things.
Oh, and by the way, before I forget, we are talking about matches and stuff. There's a in uh there's a match in Louisa. It's 3 times a year, a bowling pin match, and there's a VC. We always have a VCDL table there. I usually have a few minutes to speak to the crowd. It's another lot of fun match. They've got another one coming up on July 6th. So that's in Louisa. I'll put something in an alert for those of you that might want to go. Certainly see a lot of VCDL members at that match. It's on private property, but boy, the guy that owns the property uh, really has got a great range. He really does.
Absolutely. Yeah. Todd and Tammy put on a fabulous match up there. They do sell lunch, and it's always to benefit a charitable organization. So I didn't look at who the match benefits this time, but he's had them that benefit VCDL in the past, and he rotates through a number of worthy organizations. And if you've never shot a bowling pin match, those are incredible fun. You don't have to have any special skills other than being able to hit your target. And the way they work is that they have 5 bowling pins set up on a table, and you have several shooters on the firing line at the same time. Each shooter has their own table, and when the buzzer sounds, everybody starts blasting, and the first one to knock all of their pins off the table, not just knock them down, but shoot them off the table, wins that round, and they win a cash prize. So I think it costs you $5, and if you win the round, you get $10 back. So, but a lot of
Yeah,
people just roll it into more rounds that they can shoot, and or contribute to the charity of the day. And Brandy Polanowski, a VCDL executive member, sets up the VCDL table out there with her husband Todd. And they have you can get renew your membership there or join. They have stickers and hats and things like that that they sell. So
yeah. This year it benefits the Day Lodge number 58. It says Murray Lodge number 175 and a Mineral Lodge. So there's a few of the lodges, the Masonic lodges, that are going to be benefiting this time around. So it's always stuff that goes to charity, things to helping children or whatever. So
mhm,
it's a lot of fun. Todd, the owner of the property, is really a great guy.
absolutely. Yeah, he's very active in the Second Amendment community as well. So yeah. So the meeting in July or in June is June 20th, which is 11 days away. Yeah, a week from Thursday, and that's at XCal in Ashburn. And if you've never been there, that's a fabulous facility. Absolutely beautiful. You
It
can
was a
come early
thirty
and
million
shoot.
dollar facility or something like that. 30
Yeah,
million, I
and they do have a
think.
restaurant on premises and a snack bar. And if you want to come early and shoot before the meeting, then let them know that you're from VCDL and you get $5 off of your lane, I think it is.
That's right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that makes them charge $20 instead of 25.
Yep. And they have cool targets that you can set them to turn at different intervals and um, do different things like that. You can program the targets. So absolutely beautiful facility.
Yeah, that kind of stuff is great for practicing your double taps when
Uh
the
huh.
target turns.
Yep. You can set how long it faces you and all of that stuff.
And
Um,
well, I'll warn you, they're also a gun store, so
yeah.
you may find yourself tempted to buy a firearm while you're there, but they've got lots of nice guns here.
Yeah, that one handgun a month thing can get expensive, can it?
I know. I keep telling Margaret I'm sorry. You know, I
Government
keep
mandate. I gotta buy
uh,
one a month.
like doing my job, man.
Yeah. So you just got a new gun, actually, Philip. You
Yeah,
got
I
that
did.
365X Legion
Yeah,
with
I don't know how
the
well this will show up, but
with
yeah,
the Romeo X optic on it. It's
it's,
blurring out. You gotta
yeah. Let
like,
me see. Put something behind it.
yeah, yeah, cover
Yeah, that
your
helps.
face, something like that. Um.
And
Anyway, I like those Romeo X optics. Um.
yeah, yeah, this is nice. It co-witnesses. I like the color too, the gray on this. But
Mm,
that Romeo X co-witnesses with regular iron sights. You don't
uh-huh.
need to get suppressor sights.
Right.
And this is what I used on the match. I love it. It's got a metal body. It's the first one Sig did for the 365 that's got the metal body. This is the Legion. And yeah, it's a little more expensive, but it is a nice, nice gun. I love the feel. It's got the ported slide to help a little bit with recoil and with the weight. And the other thing they did that was nice is underneath the trigger guard, they stippled it here so that when your support hand goes there, that stippling grabs a hold of your index finger on your weak hand, and yeah, you can really feel it. It definitely helps you with your grip. So it's a nice gun.
Yeah. I have one coming in. I'll have to think about whether or not I need another gun.
Yeah, yeah,
And that holds 17 rounds, right?
yeah. That's a
Uh-huh.
17 plus one. So you carry
Right.
that in a spare mag, and you got 35 rounds of 9 millimeter.
Right. Yep. Yeah, I did switch over to the macro when that first came out, um, and put an optic on it because I had one of the original 365s and it didn't have the cut in the slide.
Right.
So I kept the baby 365 in case I need something teeny. But it's amazing the size of those things. That macro is the same size as the Glock 26, which only holds 10 rounds of 9 millimeter, and it's thinner, and it
Yeah.
holds 17.
Way thinner.
Yeah.
Now, some
So,
people have really big hands. I don't. But some
hmm
that do, the Glock is perfect because it is kind of fat. The reason it's fat, I believe, I'm pretty sure of this, was that Gaston Glock decided to do so much polymer on that gun. If he would have used metal magazines instead of polymer magazines, he could have kept them thinner and made the
hmm
grip thinner. But he was going with it. And the irony of it is, he went with the polymer, which made everything thicker. And then as time went on, he ended up putting a metal sleeve inside the polymer.
right,
So it's like, you should have just went with the metals. The whole gun didn't have to be polymer. And
right.
they also did polymer sights on that Glock, on the Glocks, which is
Yeah,
like, what? It's a nice gun. Why not put metal, at least metal sights on there? I think Gaston was very smart, but he got a little carried away with plastic.
yeah, he did. And that's my biggest complaint about the Glocks. They're great guns, they're reliable, but put metal sights on them for crying out loud. If you drop it on that front sight, then you're toast. You don't have a good sight picture anymore. So just go ahead, and it doesn't cost that much more to put the metal sights on them.
I'm not sure
So
why, but there were a lot of people competing with Glocks. They continue to be a very, very popular gun
yeah.
there. They work.
So Angela is saying that it's getting harder and harder to find places to go practice. That's absolutely true. Between Biden's efforts to shut down gun dealers and things like that, and then local ordinances that shut down ranges or won't allow them to open. Um, and we saw that in the General Assembly session this year. The bill was introduced that would have shut down all home FFLs that were within was a mile of a school or
Mile,
500.
mile and a mile and a half.
Yeah,
One
mile and
point
a
five.
half of a school. and it would have shut down 1,300 FFLs.
Yeah, there would have just
1,300.
been would have left a handful left
Right.
out of very few.
Yeah.
Everybody's usually within a 1.5 mile radius of a school somewhere.
Yep.
Very mean
Yes.
spirited. Very mean spirited.
C&T says that's why there's such a huge market for aftermarket Glock sights. Yeah, that's the first thing people do when they buy a Glock is change the sights. And people come in my shop and they say, "Well, the SIG is $100 more," and I'm like, "Yeah, but it's got night sights on it. With the Glock, you're going to spend at least $100 switching the sights to night sights, and so why not just buy the one that has the night sights on it and higher capacity and smaller gun and you know." So
Yeah.
Michael is suggesting the Blacksburg range to Angela. So I'll let you guys talk in the chat about that. Um, but we do need more ranges
Yeah.
around the state.
Sure we
You
do.
know, absolutely do. It would be nice if the state opened up a lot of the ranges that they have on the hunting lands, because they have sight-in ranges that they only open certain times a year, and there's no reason why they can't go ahead and open those up to people.
Well, their claim, excuse me, boy, their claim is that they don't have the manpower. That they need to have somebody around monitoring the range, and that they
Hmm.
don't have the manpower. Hard to believe the state has had surplus money, it seems lately, but yeah, that's maybe they're not giving it to the wildlife management group.
Yep. And if people want to get together and start a range in their neighborhood, then the localities try to shut them down. I mean, Cavalier Rifle and Pistol Club came under attack about, I guess it was about 10, 15 years ago, maybe longer. I don't want to admit that much time has passed, but I mean, they've been there since the 1960s, I want to say,
Yeah,
and have been good neighbors. And then all of a sudden, people bought land around the range that was wooded. And when they cut the trees down on their land, then they could hear the range and they started complaining. Now, never mind that we're a rural community and people hunt and people shoot on their own property. And so the gunfire they were hearing may or may not have been from the actual range. It might have been people shooting on their own property, but all it takes is a couple of Karens to make it miserable and make
yeah.
it harder on people.
And
So,
in case you guys out there missed it, the processing time for a Form 4 for you to buy a suppressor, as long as it's not on a trust, is now down to just a few days. So if you've been thinking about getting a suppressor to make it quieter for your neighbors when you shoot in your backyard, if you live somewhere where you can do that, now might be the time to get that suppressor.
yeah. So trust times are down, but not like the individual Form 4s. Um, but I heard from one dealer that said he had one approved in 9 hours on an individual transfer.
And that would also work with SBRs, right? Same form.
Yes,
If you want to do an
absolutely.
SBR and take that AR pistol and put a real stock on it and
Hmm.
a foregrip or whatever else you want, this might be the time to do that.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. So it does present some problems, like crossing state lines and things like that. But yeah, you could absolutely make yourself an SBR.
The SBR would, yeah, a suppressor isn't a problem unless you're going to a state that makes them illegal, like
Right.
Illinois. Like Illinois. In fact, it was Illinois that probably started all that because of the crime they had in the 20s, with Al Capone and all that. That's where the short barreled rifle came in, making that an item you had to get a tax stamp for, and suppressors, sawed off shotguns. And but Illinois doesn't still with all that. Illinois still doesn't let you have one. New York doesn't. California does. There aren't too many. Most states allow you to have a suppressor, and of those that do, only one state, I don't know which one it is, only one won't allow you to hunt with it. But hunting with it is a perfect example of great use because you could be out there all day, may never even fire a shot. I know because I hunted when I was a teenager. And then other times, there's a chance you take the shot, but if you don't, this way you don't need hearing protection on, so you can hear what's going on around you. You can hear leaves crunching and stuff like that, and you're not uncomfortable with those earmuffs on all day while you're out hunting. Suppressor's perfect for that kind of an application.
Absolutely. And like you said, if you shoot on your own property, it cuts the noise down to where it's not obnoxious for your neighbors. Think about it. If you don't have a muffler on your car, you get fined. You get a ticket and you get fined. But if you want to put a muffler on your gun, then you have to pay a fine. So it's just, I don't know, government logic. Same thing with your
Well,
lawnmower. If you don't have a muffler on your lawnmower and it's making too much noise, you can actually get fined for breaking the noise ordinance.
yeah, it really is crazy, but it's all based upon a lot of these laws we have are based upon movies. The
Hmm.
movies make the gun seem super like you could in a movie. I could fire, a 357 Magnum in this room through a revolver and put a suppressor on it, and you might not even be sure that a gun went off. In
Right,
reality, a revolver won't work with a suppressor, but even if it did, that gun went off.
right.
It lowers it from an airplane taking off down to a jackhammer. Now, the
Hmm.
exception being 22, because 22s are pretty quiet anyhow. And those can be put down, those can be made pretty darn quiet. But any real gun with any real power to it, yeah. But again, and I think it's the same reason we got a nunchuck. Nunchucks, and throwing stars. When was the last time you heard of a bank being held up by a throwing star? A guy with a throwing star. I can see
Only
somebody
in the
walking in
movies.
with one. Okay, man, give me all your money or I'm going to throw this at you. What? Yeah, but it was the movies. And they said, what? Look what they did in the movies with that throwing star. Oh my God. It just cut that guy's head in half. So we need to ban these things.
Ha! I see we have a guest. Let's see.
He
Let
looks
me.
familiar. I think I've seen this guy. I've seen this guy in a courtroom somewhere.
Oh, sorry. I'm inferring that maybe it was 8 o'clock Eastern, which I'm confident if I looked over my emails, that's exactly what it says. But sometimes, when you're a dad of, I'll be big. I'll just blame it on my children, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, and I definitely owe you guys, and I'm thank you. Sorry. Sorry. I
No
had this
problem at
somehow
all.
scribbled down as being 8 o'clock Central. So here I was thinking I was being responsible, signing
Yeah.
on.
Well, you're in Wisconsin. Yeah, you're in Wisconsin, as I recall.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've got laryngitis. That's why I sound like a frog. But Pat, why don't you do the introduction to save my voice?
Okay, so for those of you just tuning in, this is Tom Grieve, and Tom has a law firm, uh, Tom Grieve Law, or Grieve Law is his firm, and he has a YouTube channel, and he does some fabulous 2A YouTubes. If you have not watched him, you should watch, like, and subscribe to his channel. The reason we asked him on was because on April 1st of this year, he put up a video, um, which I thoroughly enjoyed, but he went through all of these statistics that the anti rights people put out there and went through. a number of them and thoroughly debunked them. And he said he's got an extensive database of real facts that he uses to counter all of the lies that the Bloomberg organizations and so forth spew out there. So, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom and let you.
This is very embarrassing. You know, being a Wisconsinite, we're taught to run on Lombardi time. You know, which is Vince Lombardi from, of course, the great '60s Packers. Of, you know, if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And if you're late, well, I'll still bother showing up, but maybe because I just ignorantly walked myself into it here. But well, thank you very much for having me on. You know, it's definitely it's a pleasure. And I'm here to answer questions, and I'm happy to also roll through some of the statistics that I covered as you were talking. I pulled up some of my notes from that. My April Fool's Day video is what that was, because I think I titled it something to the effect of, you know, gun control is right, or guns are bad, or something like that. And of course, anybody who has a vague passing familiarity with either my online persona or myself, which is largely one and the same, they know that that's definitely not me. But yeah, no, there's all sorts of fantastic statistics to roll through in that. Happy to go through that. Up to you.
One of them was the number of times that guns are used in self-defense every day.
Yeah.
And that's one that we frequently hear in committee meetings and so on and so forth, that guns are used way more for bad things than for good things. And if you own a gun, it's more likely to be used against you than it is to be used to save your life, and so on and so forth. So those were a lot of the things that I was interested in. And the other question before I forget is, do you make this database public, or is it just for your own use? Is there some way that people can access some of this information and use it?
Yeah, well, so, okay, I'm going to answer those in reverse order. So, my database. So, the way that I kind of workshop my videos is I use Google Documents. For anybody who knows what that is, it's free. Anybody with a Gmail account can just basically log in and start opening things up. And I use a different Google Doc for each video that I'm going to do, and each video that I'm researching before I do it. And I've got a few other documents that I'm just kind of pulling up here, that I use as kind of these research banks, because I find myself frequently, as I'm sure we all do, grasping for the same set of statistics to debunk the same, the same garbage that we keep hearing time and time and time again. And rather than, of course, enacting the labor to figure it out from scratch every single time, I just kind of found myself naturally starting to coalesce a database. And because, unfortunately, there's so much misinformation and bad information about firearms, one of my Google documents, if I can find it here, I want to say it's like 400 some odd pages at this point. And I can only traverse it by using Control F on my PC. And I don't know how much use it would be for folks, because I just have a bunch of words that make sense to me. And I just Control F. And in principle, I'm more than happy to put it out there. So in principle, that's not the issue. But I suppose it would be kind of like if you saw my handwriting, which I've been ordered not to show that to people. So
You are a lawyer, so we get that.
Yes, yeah. It would not make a lot of sense. Now, you're not the first person to suggest that I need to, in essence, taking this a couple more steps, I need to clean it up and to publish it, because there's a lot of good stuff in there. I mean, just for instance, so getting back to the first thing you mentioned. So some of those statistics comes from a President Obama study from 2013, when he ordered the Center for Disease Control to basically study the defensive use of firearms. And among the things that they did is they looked at a wide body of existing literature on the subject. And I suspect they were rather disappointed because they were, and let's just kind of scale this back to just put some context, because the problem, of course, is when you get into all these numbers, they don't mean anything without context, right? If I told you that you know, guns are somehow, some way responsible for the death of 5 people per year, that would sound awful. But equally, if I said, but they're responsible for saving 10 million people's lives, you would hopefully say, oh, well, on balance, that's pretty good. So we have to remember that typically, if you look at a lot of the homicide, or I should say the death statistics that are attributed or misattributed to firearms, we usually see the numbers somewhere in the tens of thousands. And if you actually break down the raw homicide numbers, because the vast majority of those are unfortunately suicides, we're usually seeing homicide numbers somewhere in the low 5 figures, which again is tragic, and I'm not trying to downplay that. But when you start to then balance this on the other hand, because again, the context for that number is, okay, well, how many lives do firearms save? And fortunately, President Obama helped to publish that information. And we're seeing basically numbers that range from about 500,000 defensive gun uses per year to upwards of 2.5 to even 3 million, as being argued as being some of the higher outlier numbers. We've since this study seen some one particular study come from a less than friendly pro 2A group, which is to say they're not very pro 2A, who came out, basically cherry picked a bunch of information, and they said, aha, that number is closer to about 108,000, which of course is somewhere between 5 to 10 times the amount of the homicide information. And I can also, just to kind of keep wrapping some context in this. So I'm an ex-state prosecutor from back in another lifetime. I got out of the DA's office. I'm at that age where I have to think about what year is it and then kind of do some math here. So I think I got out of the DA's office about 12 or 13 years ago at this point. And then I started eventually what would be my firm, and we now have close to 30 attorneys, and we're the largest criminal defense firm in the state of Wisconsin. And most people, if you're not familiar with Wisconsin, you think, oh, well, it's Packers, cheese, and cows. And, by square mileage, that's certainly true the vast majority of the time. But we also have this little city called Milwaukee, which goes by the nickname of Killwaukee, among other things, for reasons that, while are rather evident, it often leads the nation, although I think it's been superseded by Baltimore and occasionally Chicago. But we're usually up there when it comes to shootings per capita and all that other kind of stuff. Milwaukee can have a rough edge to it while it remains a beautiful city. But I bring this all up to say that my firm is dealing with, at any point in time, probably between about 5 to 15, and it could actually be higher, I don't know, but 5 to 15 defensive gun use cases at any point in time. And for each one of those, I don't have any numbers to tell you about how many people we actually talk to who are involved in defensive gun use cases. The FBI had a study some time ago where they said that, and I'm going to get these numbers slightly wrong, but directionally they're going to be accurate. It's somewhere on the order of about 92% of the time when someone brandishes a firearm, the bad guy leaves, pops smoke, gets the heck out of there. I can tell you from my own empirical experience of having talked to, I don't know how many people over the years who have been involved in defensive gun use cases, that is absolutely correct. And I'll also add to that probably the majority of those folks, in my experience, probably more than 50-50, never call the police. They'll call me 3 days later is what happens. And they tend to live in very rough neighborhoods, and they're afraid about calling the police, not because they're worried about what the police would do to them. They're worried about the fact the police are going to show up with lights and sirens, and everybody's going to know that they called the police. And in those neighborhoods, that's not maybe what you want to be known for. So the bottom line, when you boil this all down, is, and the reason why I go through all that is to kind of set the pieces of the chessboard so now I can start moving them around. is people make a big deal about the fact that guns are used to commit some unspeakable acts of evil, which is absolutely true. But in the same breath, you have to talk about the tens of thousands of lives that firearms save. And we're only talking about one side of the two-way coin right now, which is we're talking about ordinary street crime and criminals. We're not talking about the other side, which deals with tyrannical government and all that kind of stuff, right? Protecting liberty and so forth. So the math is overwhelming. And sometimes people point at the fact of if there were 2.5 million gun uses or 3.5 million defensive gun uses, our police reports would be littered with these. And that's where I say no. And any cop who has worked in some of these dangerous cities will tell you the exact same thing.
And so you're talking about the CDC statistics. You mentioned that in your comments there. And a few years ago, I did a deep dive into these murder by firearm or death by firearm statistics that they're using. And it's important to note that the homicide statistic includes defensive gun uses. It includes justifiable homicide as well as criminal homicide. And when I contacted the CDC to find out what it included, it also included homicide where the police officer killed a suspect or a criminal. So it was all lumped into one thing. So when you hear that there's all of these homicides by firearms, it's a broad blanket. It's not just when we think of the word homicide, we think of bad guy killing good guy. And it's not just that, it covers the whole gambit.
If you remember about 10 or 11 years ago now, there was the Boston Marathon bombing, and there were the two young men, and there was a massive manhunt. And ultimately, they were cornered. I can't recall if there was a shootout, but one of them was killed by police. I do recall that. And I don't remember if he was provoked. It doesn't matter. Besides the point. So flash forward about a year, and there was some sort of scrolling digital mural that was commemorated to the victims of gun violence. And
it was Bloomberg's bus.
And his name came up on it as the victim of gun violence, right? Right. I mean,
they did that rolling tour around the country to bring attention to all of these people that died of gun violence. And yes, there were several criminals on there.
So according to the Crime Statistics Bureau of Justice Statistics Bureau, and I realize that's a mouthful, but welcome to our government. So again, the crime statistics section of the Bureau of Justice Statistics, the rate of defensive gun use is 6 times higher than that of criminal gun use. That comes from our own government. Here's another stat for you as I'm just kind of flipping through my show notes for that video. The number of times per year an American uses a firearm to deter a home invasion alone, so not street crime, nothing else, just a home invasion, 498,000.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. One tracking database found that 41.3% of active shooter events were terminated by armed citizens. Outside of gun-free zones, the rate climbs to 63.5%, and that comes from the Crime Prevention Research Center in 2023. You know, something that's amazing to me, and I think this goes back to the essence of your suggestion, which is a great suggestion of get these statistics out there, is how difficult it is for me to find this stuff. I mean, you have no idea how much reading government PDFs and just wading through stuff. Now, fortunately, I'm well equipped for this. As someone who double majored in theology and medieval European history, I'm uniquely skilled at reading boring things and keeping myself awake. Also, as someone who grew up playing competitive chess. So, this is right up my alley. Like I'm ready for this to give me your 300-page document. I'll break it down. I need some time, but I can break this down.
Boy, better you than me.
Yeah, it's fortunately I have an absolutely fantastic team at the law firm that enables me to spend time playing on the internet, and that was selfishly part of my motivation for starting the YouTube channel. Was I wanted an excuse to read this stuff, but I had, I can't justify. Yeah, I'm going to spend 12 hours this week because I've got 3 studies that just came out in the last month that I need to push through. And now that's confused as altruism. But before the YouTube channel, that was just downright selfishness on my behalf. Yeah, here's a whole bunch of statistics about, but more people carrying more guns means more crime, right? Because that's another thing. Well, look, certainly we can agree that if we just had less guns, if we just had less people carrying guns, that would help solve crime, right? And it's not. After passing concealed carry laws, Florida homicide rate fell from 36% above the national average to 4% below the national average. In Texas, murder rates fell 50% faster than the national average in the year following their passage of concealed carry. And also, as a corollary, rapes fell by 93% faster in the first year after the enactment and 500% faster in the second year. Assaults fell 250% faster. I got pages of this stuff.
And that's all stuff that the other side lies about all of that.
Always.
Oh no, yeah.
Constantly. And I can't tell you how many people I have invited onto my program who are pro gun control, or they're something worse rather than being pro gun control. They're, well, I'm pro gun, but, dot, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the attempted Trojan horse is in so many respects worse. I think there's a reason why in Dante's Inferno, in the 9th level of hell, they reserved for people who are traitors and betrayers. And I feel like that starts with the I'm pro-gun, but crowd.
Yeah. When I started shooting IDPA, it was not terribly long after we had an attempted armed robbery in a store that I ran that my husband and I ran at the time. But I was amazed at the number of other people that were in the sport that had been involved, or had some sort of a confrontation where they had an attempted armed robbery, or they were attacked in some way, and they got serious about their right to keep and bear arms and to carry for self-defense. So, and a lot of people related to me that the fact that they did have a gun with them stopped a crime, and so many times it goes unreported. And even if it's reported to the police, it doesn't get reported to the media.
Oh, God, no. As someone who has done a fair amount of media interviews with, you name it, NPR, New York Times, Washington Post, Reuters, just you name it. I've probably done interviews with them. And I will say both political spectrums, whether it's Fox News or so forth, in my experience, they will all, to some degree or another, cherry pick what you say to fit whatever narrative they want to put out there, which is the fantastic things about organizations like yours, who are doing a great job of trying to break down those traditional media lines by hosting programs like this. And whether your viewers know it or not, you are doing not only yourself a favor and a service by availing yourself of the information and the camaraderie and fellowship, for lack of a better way of putting it, for participating in forums like this. You're also helping to build that community, which is ultimately going to be pushing back. This right here, you all right here in this chat room, and certainly, of course, Philip and Pat, you guys for hosting this, and to the extent that I can participate, so much the better. But we are all doing one small thing at a time of taking down all these gatekeepers who stop people from knowing that, for instance, according to the Department of Justice National Crime Victimization Survey, the probability of serious injury during an attack is 2.5 times higher for women who offer no resistance to their attacker compared to women who fight back with a firearm. Now, isn't
Mhm.
that kind of a worthwhile statistic that you'd want to share with your daughter? Isn't that kind of a worthwhile statistic you want to share with your friends, your neighbors? But that information isn't out there unless you are checking out venues like this.
Right. And I tell people all the time, I get asked frequently, well, why do you carry a gun? What are you scared of? And I say, it's not that I'm scared. It's that I'm prepared. Just like I have a fire extinguisher. Well, I have multiple fire extinguishers in my house, but I have one in my kitchen and one in my bedroom. I said, you have fire extinguishers in your house, right? No. I'm like,
Yeah,
okay. So
that's one of their favorites. So I took my wife on a surprise trip for her birthday because we're married with kids, we never go anywhere. So I just we went we traveled out of country for a week, and um, so we were having dinner. Those hibachi places, where you sit down and
Mhm.
you're kind of grouped with, give or take, there's 12 of you kind of piled in there, and it's part of the experience, right? You catch some shrimp or broccoli in your mouth, and you chit chat with some strangers. So we were with a group of a bunch of very nice people from Toronto area, and invariably you get to the point in the night of like, oh, well, what do you do? And I say, well, I'm a Second Amendment attorney, and it took I probably could have clocked it on a stopwatch of how long you could just feel the attitude shift. Um, and then
Mhm.
we were debating and chatting for the better part of about 2 hours following that. And one of the questions that you just kind of touched on is the whole idea of, well, are you carrying a gun, or you're carrying a gun because you want to shoot someone? Isn't that right? Because that's one of the things they threw at me. That's one of the things we all have to suffer through. And I love your fire extinguisher analogy. I've used that as well. I'm also a big fan of, well, I click my seatbelt on not because I want to hit someone.
Right.
That's not the concept of purchasing a car with airbags, is to use it. But when you look at statistics about who carry guns, people with concealed carry licenses are 5.7 times less likely to be arrested for a violent offense compared to the general public. People with concealed carry licenses are 13.5 times less likely to be arrested for nonviolent offenses compared to the general public. In Florida, a state that has allowed concealed carry since the late 1980s, you are twice as likely to be attacked by an alligator than by a person who has a concealed carry permit. Texas, people with concealed carry licenses are 14 times less likely to commit any crime. Um, Again, this is just one of my documents. I'm just kind of scrolling through this one because it's
Mhm.
I try to pack that video with just all the trite nonsense we're all hearing all the time. But yeah, it's incredible.
So you may or may not be able to answer this question, but I'm going to put you on the spot anyway. Do you have any statistics on how often trace data actually helps solve a crime?
I'm not going to have that at my fingertips. I can tell you that.
Okay.
The question is, um, I'm trying to think back if I've encountered stuff like that. Uh, I'm most of the way through, but unfortunately, I backburnered it some time ago when some ATF stuff picked up. I'm most of the way through reading a really interesting study done by the University of Chicago on underground firearms markets
Hmm.
and kind of how the black market works, which is interesting for me because, so as a criminal defense attorney, people could be forgiven to assume that we probably represent really bad people. The truth is that we don't. We're very fortunate to be in our position in the market where, as I tell people, we represent good people on a bad day. That's our crowd. We don't deal with gangs. We don't deal with, if children are being hurt, if animals are being hurt, if police officers are being hurt, we're not touching it. And I take it as a point of pride that Judges, cops, you name it, refer their friends and family to us when they get into trouble. But we do talk to all these other unsavory types when they call in. And I couldn't tell you how many times in a week I talk to someone who's in a gang or a family, as they call them sometimes, who there's a robbery, there was a shootout, there was something or other, or maybe it's just a plain old felon in possession of a firearm. But I always make it a point to ask them, so where did you get what kind of gun did you have? And what kind of ammo did you have? And where did you get it from? And I do have a bunch of statistics, not in front of me right now, but I also do have a bunch of statistics that have reviewed a couple of very informal and lacking, but they're interesting studies and insights into crime guns specifically, as well as some more detailed ones. There was a federal prison survey that went through how did you get your firearm for people who had been convicted of a crime and were serving time in prison. And invariably, what they tell me is it's always, oh, I bought it from someone, or someone gave it to me. Now, that may or may not be true, right? Statistically, we know that approximately half of crime guns are secured from theft. That is a huge vector for crime guns. A lot of car thefts, in fact. But no, off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you if I've encountered statistics for trace. I will tell you that different police departments and different states and regions have different orientations and outlooks on running traces. So for instance, here in Milwaukee, we have typically one of the top 1 or 2 gun stores in the country of crime guns recovered from crime scenes that trace back to them. And it's not necessarily, at least entirely, because Milwaukee is awash with crime. It's more so, well, it's at least hand in hand with, at a minimum, part of the fact that the Milwaukee Police Department they trace everything. And many other police departments really don't trace much of anything, only in rare circumstances. So I suspect, and the reason why I bring that up is because I would really want to read the methodology for how there, that's a little bit better. I had my big Google Doc up, which makes my whole computer screen white. But I suspect that a lot of the data out there might be contaminated by the fact that different police departments have radically varying practices on how they utilize trace opportunities.
So I haven't been able to find any data on it recently. The reason I ask is because of this quote unquote ghost gun thing and the pushback against privately made firearms that don't have serial numbers and requirements to do serial numbers and so on and so forth. But years ago, I did look into this, and it was almost single digit percentage of crimes that were actually solved using the trace data. Now, it can lead back to the original purchaser, and it can reunite somebody with a gun that was stolen from them. But as a general rule, John Smith doesn't go to the gun store, buy a gun, do a background check, take it, do an armed robbery, and drop it in the floor at the convenience store that he just robbed, and then leave the scene. That just doesn't happen.
No, that's definitely not the case. Generally speaking, again, speaking as an ex-state prosecutor, criminal defense attorney, if you have progressed and leveled up your criminal career to the point where you're using a firearm in commission of a crime, invariably it is illegal for you to possess that firearm. And I'm sure that's not true 100% of the time, but it's pretty dang close to 100% of the time. I have no statistics to wrap into that, but It's something to that effect. Typically, they're using straw buyers who largely go unprosecuted, by the way, in my experience. But typically, they're using straw buyers, and you have to get through multiple different layers. There was a couple years ago, there was a Justice Department. Maybe it wasn't a couple years ago. Maybe it was about a year ago. Because my desk at my office was just saturated with all these different. They came out with 50 studies, and then they collated them into the study of the studies to look at the United States. And one of the things they were looking at was how common was it for privately manufactured firearms, i.e., so-called ghost guns, to be used in crimes. And this was one of those studies where they didn't draw any conclusions. They kind of just churned out statistics. And obviously, who the heck knows how accurate or inaccurate it is. But just the same, when the Justice Department's going to do something, I'll sit up and pay attention to it. So I was reading through it, and something that I noticed, and I never did a video on it because there's frankly not much to talk about, I think. But something that I did notice was the fact that the ratio of PMFs, privately manufactured firearms, that were used and recovered at crime scenes was significant. First off, it's the vast minority. So let's start there. Okay. But secondly, where they ebbed and went higher was in the states that have very burdensome firearm laws. California, Illinois. The more difficult you make it, as people have said, the free market shall provide. And we have seen that time and time again. And it's I think that you could make some arguments, and I think they're scary arguments. They're arguments that I'm uncertain what to do with them. Let's put it that way. But it would seem to me, and I don't have any statistics to back this up. This is a hunch. But the cheaper you make firearms, the more likely they're going to be used in crime. There seems to be a mapping correlation to that. And now notice what I said. I didn't say more firearms, because if you look internationally, and I did do a video on this as well. If you look internationally, of course, the United States, we're the only country in the world with more firearms than there are people, right? Switzerland is a far cry from us. I think we have somewhere on the order of, if we have got 100 people, I think we have like 120 or 130 firearms. Switzerland is in second place at about 60 firearms per 100 people. And then there's a far cry to you get to third and fourth place. But we come nowhere near to leading the international crime statistics as far as gun crimes per capita. Homicides by firearm per capita. The countries that tend to lead those, and when I say tend to lead those, I mean like the United States is in 38th or something like that. Virtually all of the top 10 to 20 spots are countries where they have between 1 to 4 guns per person. So I just want to be emphatically clear. I'm not suggesting that we should ban firearms. I'm 0% suggesting that. But there does seem to be, in my experience, that, all these videos of gangs shooting each other with AKs and so forth, right? You didn't used to see that so much back when AKs were more expensive. And then you had the so-called Trump slump, 2016 to 2020, when firearms became a lot cheaper because there's less, among other things, less fear of seizure and everything else. And you really saw an uptick. You no longer had $1,200 ARs. Now you had $500 Anderson Arms ARs or something like that, or Palmetto State. And that made them a lot more accessible. There's a reason why, and I do have this, I could find it probably in about 20 seconds if you wanted to, but I referenced before that there was an interesting insight into specifically crime guns. And there's a huge percentage of crime guns that they're inoperable. People are buying junk from each other that just trades on the street. Quite often, there's no ammunition in it. Very rarely is it topped off with a full magazine of matching ammunition to the firearm. More likely, it's going to have partial loads. They're buying loosies, they're buying ones and twos and all that kind of stuff. I mean, this is what you see. So there's definitely an economic factor that somewhere layers into this discussion, which is what made me very interested in reading this study on black market firearms, because there's certainly an economic component to this entire situation, as there is to every situation. And of course, the opposite is equally as dangerous. And again, because every single thing has to be weighed out, right? So if you make firearms more expensive, well, good luck being a single mom on the wrong side of the tracks who can't afford to move out. Good luck trying to afford a firearm to defend yourself and your family, right? So there's always two sides to this sword.
Right. So I have to wonder too, though, when the firearms are more affordable, could it be that because more people have these firearms, more good people buying firearms, that maybe more are getting stolen because there's just more out there available? There's more left in glove boxes of cars, or there's more left in nightstands that house gets broke into and the gun gets stolen. And that may be a contributing factor rather than the fact that the inexpensive guns are being bought by criminals, that the inexpensive guns are being bought by people that live in bad neighborhoods, or not necessarily even bad neighborhoods, but there's just more out there and more of them getting stolen and ending up in the black market. Um,
I think the answer is all the above.
yeah.
All the above. And the commenter gun websites, I mean, also hit it as well, as far as Dracos being featured in music videos and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there's absolutely a cultural component to people will imitate. And,
Hmm.
you know, there's that expression by Andrew Breitbart that culture is upstream of politics. Well, I mean, culture is upstream of politics, and Second Amendment is politics, whether we want it to be or not. I view it as something much deeper than politics, of course, and I'm sure you too as well. But it doesn't change the fact that this is all, again, kind of wrapped up into the same picture. I think part of it is who has access to what, realistically. Because if you have, let's imagine two different residential communities. One has an average home value of $500,000. Everybody owns their own homes. My strong suspicion is that if every single one of those homes purchased a Draco, that's probably not going to do much to put them on the black market. Presumably, these folks are going to be more financially stable. They're going to be less likely, writ large, to need to sell it on short order to make cash. And if they do sell it, they're probably going to a gun show, or they're bringing it into a store, or there's going to be kind of a retail point of access. They're not very likely to probably walk over to their neighbor and say, "Hey, do you want this?" Now, let's take a different example. Let's imagine a situation where we have people living at or near or below the poverty line. Doesn't matter if you're talking about a trailer park. Doesn't matter if you're talking about an urban metropolitan area. It doesn't matter. If you gave all those people Dracos, there's a really good chance that folks who are less financially secure, probably 3/4 of those are going to be gone inside 60 days or something like that, right? And then they'll be flipped again and flipped again and flipped again, and they're eventually going to wind up at the people who want them. And who are the people who want them? Well, there's an element of people who want them for the wrong reasons, right? So I think that there's these, in law, we've got this expression for what's called the stream of commerce, right? And there's all sorts of different streams of commerce, and the stream of commerce in an affluent area is going to be quite different than the stream of commerce in a lower income area. And there's probably not as many people living in the $500,000 home subdivision who are looking to commit violent street crimes. I would hazard a guess as an ex-state prosecutor that you would have a much higher percentage, and still the vast minority of folks, let me be clear, but as compared A to B to these two communities, you would have a much higher percentage of street crime presumably happening in the lower income area. It's something like 1.5% of streets in the United States account for 26% of violent crime in the United States. Criminologists call this the law of crime concentration. If you look at the FBI statistics for homicide rates, and they break them up into three different, in many different categories, but canonically there's kind of three. You've got major metropolitan downtown areas, you've got the suburbs, and you've got rural. Suburbs and rural are reasonably comparable to each other. Perhaps to no one's surprise, however, the major metropolitan areas have a big violent crime problem. And if you were to compare those internationally, the suburbs and the rural areas in the United States would be some of the safest countries in the whole world if you go by violent crime. And really, writ large, the United States, we don't tend to have a violent crime problem. We tend to have a property crime problem if you want to look macro scale at other countries. But really, our problems, if you broke out the major metropolitan areas, not even all of them, just, the top 10 or something, they do a huge amount to sway the crime statistics across the entire country. I think I have a couple of those statistics actually right here. This one was a little bit different. A study from 2017 found that about 60% of rural homes own a gun. I don't know about you. That checks out in my experience. Maybe even low. I don't know. 40% of suburban homes own a firearm, while 28% of urban homes own a firearm. So obviously it goes to follow that if guns are the problem, then major downtown cities would be far safer than country or rural areas, right? Well, according to that 2017 FBI study, you're basically about 250 to over 400% more likely to be murdered in a city compared to the country or suburbs. And almost by coincidence, homicide numbers basically map similarly to instances of rapes, robberies, assaults, and burglaries. And I can spare you a lot of time going through tons of other statistics and sum it up like this. Bad things happen where bad things happen. And where the smaller bad things happen, and then it stacks all the way up and it leads to your homicide statistics. You don't tend to see a community that's thriving and has low property crime, low rapes, low assaults, but they have a massive homicide problem. It just doesn't work like that. They tend to cluster together.
So we had a question earlier that I wanted to put on here. Gun Websites asked, do you feel that NICS is useless and a waste of resources and should be removed? And what is the chance of removing it?
So I had a chance to talk face-to-face with, I don't remember what her title was, but if she wasn't in charge of NICS, she must have been adjacent to being in charge of NICS. And we were talking about specifically in the context of the NFA background purchases, because I was asking her specifically, what's the flow between ATF to NICS, back to NICS, and what does that all look like behind the scenes? And that was kind of an interesting conversation, but it's a little bit off point for you. We consistently see denials from NICS across the country. I guess my answer for you is I don't know. And let me specifically put my finger on the pulse of what I would need to know to answer that question. So we know that there's a certain amount of denials in any given day, month, year of NICS. Okay. And we don't know whether or not those denials are saving lives or not, obviously. But I would be curious to know how many of those denials are valid, because I can't tell you how many people I've helped over the years who had incorrect denials. And then what happened to those people who it was a valid denial? Did they go on to commit a violent crime with a firearm? And you got to be careful about kind of following that one down to the bottom. The reason why I say that is because and there, to me, the Second Amendment's two sides of the coin. We have the how do you deal with crime, and then there's the how do we defend liberty. And unfortunately, I think a lot of times those two goals can live in tension with one another. And Nix is a perfect example of that, because I would bet, and I don't have any statistics to pull off the top of my head, but I would bet that if there was no background check, anybody could just show up and purchase a firearm the same that you could a bag of chips. I would suspect that bad guys would have a lot easier access to firearms. So from a street crime perspective, Nix seems to be a good thing. But at the same time, Nix is a bad thing when it comes to defensive liberty, because we all know that universal background checks followed by registration, all washing through Nix, is going to be the springboard and the foundation to mass firearm roundup and seizure someday. We all know that that's what's going to happen. That's the game plan, right? And we've seen this written by a couple organizations that have been out there, although they're no longer silly enough to put these documents in writing where people can get them. But before the internet, they used to. Then some people got them and they put them online. There was a group in the 70s. They renamed themselves. I want to say maybe it's the Brady campaign, but they were the campaign to ban all handguns or something like that. And their playbook came out, which was basically universal background checks followed by mass registration, followed by mass confiscation. And so, yeah, false. Yeah. John Lott's got a lot of good information out there. So I'm very conflicted on issues that we have street crime and we've got liberty living in tension with one another. And my default position is always to side with liberty in those circumstances. Because at the end of the day, bad guys will always come with more numbers. They will always come ready to do violence. They will always come when and where they want. All the laws we're talking about is just deciding whether or not grandma can shoot back, right? Or whether the mom and dad can shoot back. That's all we're really talking about here.
So my experience has been the same thing as gun websites. He says in 17 years of running a gun shop, which I haven't been doing it that long, but almost all of the denials in my experience were either mistakes or they were something stupid. For instance, I had one where a young man came in to pick up his gun and he was denied, and the state police were on the way to pick him up. Well, it turns out that his ex-wife had been abusing their child, and when the court order restraining her from seeing the child was entered, they put in the restraining order against both parents. He had no clue. Absolutely no clue. And it was a mistake by somebody, I don't know who, but he was denied, and I had to sell the gun for him, which was a transfer in. I had ended up having to sell the gun for him so that he could pay the legal fees to get through all of this, because it cost him money to not go to jail, right, because somebody else made a mistake. And these are the kind of things that I see as an FFL. I will say my personal opinion on the 4473 is it doesn't stop crime. Most criminals don't go through the normal channels to get the guns. And B, it's a presumption of guilt until you prove yourself innocent. And then then you have the right to exercise a constitutionally protected right after you prove your innocence, which goes counter to all of the the foundation of our country, the very principles that this country was founded on.
So you guys get a different angle on this than I do. So here in Wisconsin, I have folks who call me, the stores refer them to me when they've been denied and they want to do something about it. Now, I say you have a different perspective, not in a better or worse sense. You see everyone. I only see the people who may actually think that they're right.
Hmm.
Because presumably, if they know they're screwed, why are they coming to me, right?
Right.
I would say anecdotally that probably about 20% of the people, I can solve their problem at no charge. I don't charge them a nickel. And they just explain what's going on. In Wisconsin, we do have some good open records databases uh, for our state courts. And I can solve it and point them in the right direction, and they're fine. There's definitely a good chunk of people who are it's illegal for them due to the current status of laws. Typically, there's a large portion of them who were probably teenagers or young men. It's almost always men who were convicted of something back in the, I mean, 60s, 70s, 80s, sometimes the 90s, and they didn't know it was a felony, or they didn't know it was a prohibition, or they thought they would be okay. Wisconsin also, we're a mix of, we've got some really good firearm laws and we've got a couple really bad ones. And one of the bad ones is we're a very restrictive state as far as who's allowed to possess firearms. So one quick example of that is if you were convicted of a crime in another state that would be a felony in Wisconsin, then you're prohibited. You're treated as though you're a felon. So, for instance, there's our next door neighbor state, Minnesota. They have a fourth degree burglary to a building. I don't know what that is. I just know that I see that because that's a misdemeanor in Minnesota, whereas 100% of burglaries in Wisconsin are considered felonies. So you get these people who probably pled something down to a misdemeanor. They thought they were going to be okay. Life brought them to Wisconsin, and now they're were inadvertently committing felonies for Lord knows how many years. I also think that Wisconsin law is unconstitutional, but that's neither here or there. To your question, I think that as the laws exist right now, based only on the sample set of people who contact me in my office, which I'd have to think are probably motivated individuals who think that they're going to be in the right? Or at a minimum, they're motivated. Let's put it that way. I'd probably say conservatively half of them are correctly prohibited under the current laws. Now, does that mean that they're bad people? Does that mean that they shouldn't be allowed to possess firearms? That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that as the current laws are set up, and those laws might change in the next 2 weeks because the United States Rahimi case in the U.S. Supreme Court, which is going to grapple with the issue of who are the people in the Second Amendment when we're talking about the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The definition, who are the people, is going to be coming out. And so we're talking about prohibited possessors. So people who've been convicted of a felony, violent felonies, misdemeanor crimes of domestic violence. We're talking domestic abuse injunctions, any qualifying injunction for that matter. Mental health records. We're talking about possibly red flag laws. I don't think they'll exactly go there, but something like that. But right. Yeah. So I can hazard a guess of what Robert just posted up about the trust suppressor from August of 23, and he's still waiting while other people are getting 1-day turnarounds. So they added 6 new people back in, I don't know, Q1 of this year, if memory serves. And 6 new people may not sound like a lot, but when you're talking about going from, I don't remember if it was 28 to 34 or 34 to 40. I don't have those notes in front of me. But that's a lot of new people. And I would think that most organizations would kind of take their mountains of paperwork and just redistribute it so they can start hammering through people more quickly. But what I really think they did is just all the new incoming applications went to the people who had nothing in their workflow. And as a result, if you applied in, I don't know, January, February, March, whatever it was, these people really started onboarding, you're getting turned around in days or weeks. But if you applied prior to all that, you're stuck waiting in line. Kind of like if they open up a new checkout lane at the grocery store, but they only took people who weren't in line already.
So the NFA, there's no real rhyme or reason that I can see of how they process the forms, because I have forms that have been out for at least as long as Roberts have. I have other forms for trust that came back in 3 months and 4 months. But forms that I filed at the same time are still waiting. Each one of these only has one responsible party. It's not like they have 15 trustees on the trust.
Right.
So I do know that for individual forms that are not trusts, that are filed as an individual, we're seeing turnaround times in hours, days, or weeks. But trusts are still taking longer. Why, I don't know. They are the seminar that I attended about a month and a half ago said that they've streamlined the individual process and they're working on streamlining the trust process. But all the ones that are in the current process are going to stay in whatever process they were in. They aren't going to the new streamlined thing. But they also have blamed it on the FBI taking too long on the background checks. And they said that the FBI added more people to do the background checks. So I don't know.
So this has actually been something that's been used as a court argument against the existence of Title II National Firearms Act. So basically saying, look, when you make things take too long, justice delayed is justice denied, right? So there's been, I forget which court it was, but there was a court that really admonished the federal government for taking so long to be doing these background checks. So my conversation with the NICS director or whoever it was they told me that, look, basically it goes in it goes into the ATF, then it flips to NICS, then it goes back to ATF, and at different stages, there's different choke points. Basically, sometimes these guys are going slow, sometimes that's going slow. The only way it ever goes fast is if both sides are going quickly, right? It only takes one side to gum up the whole thing, and I suspect that if it's like every other bureaucracy I've ever encountered, they're both doing one of these things all the time. But that's basically how they kind of chalked that up.
Yep. And the chain is only as strong as the weakest link.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's again, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense the way that they work it. I haven't spoken with people. Of course, it's really hard to get a hold of anybody at the NFA branch, but I haven't really gotten any definitive answers about why it is that some trust applications will come back in 3 months and some take 13, 14 months. So, it's, I don't know.
There definitely seems to be a combination of luck of the draw combined with when you put your application in.
Yes. Or who the person is that's processing your application.
Oh yeah, all the above.
So,
Yeah.
and the sad truth is that their record keeping is less than stellar. If I kept records and processed forms like the NFA did, I would be in jail, and substantially my bank account would be emptied out with the fines, because
yeah.
I mean they've assigned suppressors to me that I never had, never purchased, never. I mean, and they've lost paperwork, all kinds of things. So,
I've
yeah.
got stories.
Uh-huh.
I've got stories, and a frequent guest on my channel, Mike Kwiatkowski, he's got even more stories of crazy NFA registry issues and problems and gaps and holes, and yeah, it's It's interesting. It's interesting. I see some questions regarding law insurance and
Yeah,
USCCA.
USCCA or yeah.
Yeah, so people who know me or have been engaged with some of these issues know that I have a very public relationship with USCCA, which goes back about 10 years now. Um, I don't have any contract with them. What people don't know is that I have relationships with a lot of these companies. The USCCA are the folks that I do some advertising promotion with, but my firm has worked with in the last 12 months. 3 or 4 of these organizations, if I'm not mistaken. And if I had to guess, let's see who wrote that question. Robert Martin. If I had to guess, what you're getting at, Robert, is you want me to address some of the controversy and some of the questions that are swirling around. Maybe you could, because I don't know. Are you asking me what are these organizations? How do they differ? Or are you asking me specifically about some of the controversy that's out there? And not just Robert. It could be Mike. It could be uh, Cragans.
Yeah,
Cragans.
so Robert asked what you thought about US law insurance, and I'm not sure if he meant US Law Shield or USCCA. Mike Pop brought up USCCA. And let's see. Cragen said you have an association with USCCA.
Mm-hmm.
And Jill McDaniel is a USCCA instructor. So she,
Well, all these groups work very differently from one another. There's there's 3 different models, more or less, that are out there. You have USCCA, as far as I know, is the only one of its type. There's another company called Attorneys and Retainer that, as far as I know, is the only one of its type. I'm sure there's others that I just don't know about, but I know a fair amount because I've been in this market space for about a decade now. Most other companies are all more or less the same. CCW Safe, US Law Shield, and others. And there's permutations on it. But the way that those generally work, they all have basically the same criteria of what it takes to qualify for coverage. You basically have to be in a bona fide act of self-defense. And they will all reserve the right to make that determination themselves. They're not going to let the client make the determination. They will all make the determination themselves. And then where they differ is what happens next. And some of these places, you're stuck with only their particular attorney. That's the way AOR works. That's the way US Law Shield works. CCW Safe, if memory serves, will hire the attorney of their choice to represent you. I think they said in their underwriting policy last time I looked back in November that they will try to work with you, but at the end of the day, they reserve the exclusive right to determine the attorney of their choice. USCCA will let you choose any attorney you want. They do break that into 2 different tiers. If you hire someone who they believe is qualified, so it's not your cousin who just graduated law school last year and has never been to criminal court. If you want to hire that person, they're going to give you, I think it was $100,000 or $150,000 of coverage. If you want to hire someone who's remotely qualified, it's unlimited criminal defense coverage. So they'll pay for any attorney, no matter how much at that point. And then, check the policies. They always change as far as who can, how much money they are offering for bail. And, this company pulls ahead a little bit, then that one does this, that one does that. One disadvantage that the AOR model has as a law firm is that they are encumbered by a lot of the professional ethics duties that prohibit them from posting on behalf of their clients. I don't know if they've figured out a workaround on that yet. There probably are workarounds on it. And I've talked directly to a lot of the ownership as well as the C-suite people at a variety of these different companies. So I'm somewhat uniquely positioned to read a lot of this stuff and to chat about it. everybody just needs to do their own research, figure out something that they're comfortable with. I can tell you that I've worked with USCCA for 10 years. Just last week or the week before, there was another one of their members who called us for a self-defense case. Actually, my phone rang at 2:30 in the morning, and I answered it and talked to him and all that. And as the facts kind of came out, it wasn't very self-defense-y, but they covered him without question. I have found USCCA personally to be extraordinarily liberal as far as what they will call self-defense. And I realize that that's the center of a lot of the controversy that has been deliberately cooked up to sell memberships for rival companies. But yeah, I mean, they'll seem to be doing a pretty good job as far as putting boots on the ground and doing a good job for people. But I don't think that they're all equal.
Okay, one more question. We've got some good questions here that might have to be answered in the chat. But we did have a question about what's the difference between purchasing an NFA item as an individual versus a trust? And what are the advantages of a trust?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot, and you could also purchase with an LLC or something like that, but no one does that. It's basically, they tend to be revocable living trusts or something along those lines. There used to be massive advantages if you go back about 10 years, because prior to that, in order to get, and if you wanted to purchase a suppressor or a Title II weapon individually, you had to get a chief law enforcement officer sign off. And depending on where you lived, that just may have not been an option. So it used to be that trusts, they gained traction as a popular tool because frankly, they were the only show in town for lots of folks trapped in lots of counties. But those regulations changed, and that no longer needs to be the case, with some exceptions. Wisconsin is a local one involving machine guns. But here it is at the end of the day. There are very tight laws and regulations that surround Title II firearms. That should come as no surprise to anybody here. The gist to it is that in many states and in federal law, it is only titled or registered to an individual or an entity. If you are in possession of it and it's not titled to you, that is arguably what we like to call a felony. So if you're someone who is very worried and is about bad things happening, if you're that person who got struck by lightning or got attacked by alligators or whatever else the case may be, there is a degree of risk mitigation that you are purchasing through the trust. Because you can, for instance, add your spouse to it as a responsible person. And now if you decide to leave your suppressor on the kitchen table when you go out to the store to pick up some eggs and milk, you're arguably not committing some felonies in the process, right? If your spouse is home. If you're not worried about those sorts of things, because those prosecutions are few and far between, if ever, then some of the more practical advantages are you do gain segregated estate planning. So a lot of people don't have any kind of formal estate planning. And one of the attorneys in our firm is an estate planning attorney, as they would say. Failing to plan is planning to fail. You can also say the same thing about firearms training and readiness training and so forth. So you're at least getting some provisions in place to take advantage of. Maybe you have a particular friend or a particular child or children that you want to leave them to. So you can take advantage of the Form 5 process for a tax-free transfer. So, of course, if you do a Form 1 or Form 4 to purchase, you're paying a $200 tax stamp, right? But if the item is transferring by operational law, that turns into a Form 5 transfer, which is a tax-free transfer. So depending on where you are, market prices for trusts, if you go online, they're usually about $100 plus or minus, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. If you're going through a reputable attorney, they seem to be $300 to $500. I do see some charlatans out there charging, even in my neck of the woods, $8,000, $10,000, and I have no idea what you're getting for that. But other than a big bill, but if you're paying more than, let's say, $800 or $1,000, there might be something wrong with this process, or there's something that's very unusual. But right, I mean, you're gaining. There's also an assurance, so that we've moved past this point, I would say. Online trusts became very popular about 10 years ago now, somewhere in that 2015 to maybe 2020 region, is they started to take off. And I can't tell you how many trusts I saw that were problematic from people, from websites online. I can thankfully tell you that is no longer the case. I have not seen a flawed trust get chunked out by a major website or company in literally years at this point, probably since at least COVID. So I have a lot more faith to endorse effectively my competitors, but I don't really care, of saying reputable online companies seem to be doing a good job. But I would strongly encourage folks to not get I know that there's these one-shot trusts or something like that, where it's just one trust for this one firearm. Don't do that. Get one trust. And then, first off, if you're buying a suppressor, you're going to wind up getting like 6 Title II firearms. Okay. So in the long run, you're going to wind up buying multiple trusts. And the other thing, speaking of multiple trusts, is now you're going to have 5 or 6 trusts. Do you realize what a headache that is? Don't do that to yourself. Just do one trust, be done.
Yep. And VCDL board member John Pierce does NFA Trust for $100 with lifetime updates. So, and it's a very good trust. So last question for real, and then we really got to go because we've been on here a couple of hours now.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's been an engaging conversation, and other than a couple people had to drop off and go to sleep, I've really enjoyed it. But federal judge Goodwin in West Virginia blocked a federal ban on possession of firearms with no serial number. What's up with that? Do you know anything about that, or?
Yeah, so there's been a few of these, and it's basically looking at Brune case decisions, the New York State Rifle Pistol Association case from June of 2022, which of course completely rewrote the battle lines and the landscape for how to determine if something is a regulation or gun law is constitutional. And the very short story for those of you who may not have heard about it is that most of the time, there's obscure exceptions, which I won't bore you with unless you want to, but most of the time, the overwhelming majority of the time, in order for a gun law to be deemed constitutional, it is the government's burden to establish that it comes from our nation's history and tradition of firearm regulation. And generally that time span, everybody except the lunatic fringe can agree that we're at least talking about Civil War or earlier. If you're pro Second Amendment, you're pushing for early Republic, you're pushing for 1830s and back. There's a lot of gun laws that start to creep in the 1850s through the 1870s, particularly, that get very ugly. And understandably, that's why the pro-gun, pro-victim, the anti-gun, pro-gun control, pro-victim disarmament crowd wants to. I've heard them argue that the 1990s constitutes our nation's history and tradition. So there's apparently nothing that they're not willing to say. Right? Yeah. Hopefully you have a defibrillator or something over there. Yes, I think that was our nation's attorney general who actually made that argument in a speech, that the 1992 crime bill constitutes our nation's history and tradition. So the gist to it is that, well, the serialization law comes from the 1968 Gun Control Act, and that's not terribly close even to the United States Civil War, which of course it's got about 103 years on, right? 1865 versus 1968. So that would seemingly constitute an argument saying, look, this law is unconstitutional. Now, the flip side of this is that Brune was also careful to say that they were not trying to disrupt a lot of the commercial regulations surrounding firearms. Now, they weren't super specific about that. I took that to mean, in a fair reading, they're not trying to throw out FFLs. They're not trying to throw out NICs. They're not trying to throw out presumably serial numbers. those seem to be areas with that comment. I think, and again, this is not. A lot of times people get on me because they say, "Oh, I'm in favor of this or I'm in favor of that." No. I'm just prognosticating about what I think the court means. That's all I'm saying here. Okay. I think the court is, if it was directly challenged in the U.S. Supreme Court, they would save serial numbers. I think they would save serial numbers. They would save FFL. They would save a lot of the guts of the 1968 Gun Control Act. And they did the same thing in the same decision, the Brune decision, when they blessed the concept of sensitive locations. And they specifically enumerated polling places, schools, and places where the government is in its heartland of its domain and function. I think that's their words, by the way, not mine. As being, legislative chambers, judicial chambers when court is in session. These are places where it's okay to ban firearms, as well as places that may be analogous to them. And of course, that opens up the can of worms. So that's what I think that means. That's why I think it was thrown out, is because the judge did a close reading and said, 1968 Gun Control Act, where serial numbers came in, that's not part of our nation's history and tradition. But I think that would probably lose if it made it to the U.S. Supreme Court.
All right. So with that, I want to thank you, Tom, for joining us tonight. Very engaging conversation. We had a lot of good questions, and we really appreciate you coming on.
I'm sorry that I came along so late, but if you ever like to have me back on, I promise I will double check it. And
my fault. I sent the Eastern time instead of the Central time,
that's not
knowing
your
that you
fault.
were
That's
in
not your
Central
fault.
time.
It's
So.
not your fault. That's 100% my fault. I'm probably being a man. I was incapable of multitasking, and I probably put something on the wrong way. I mean, I know I put something on the wrong way because I thought I was being such a goody two shoes, getting on 15 minutes early and all that. So, but thank you for bearing with me. It was a pleasure to be on. Please always feel free to invite me back, and I'd be more than happy to come back.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right, Philip, do you have anything to say in closing? Are you muted? You're muted.
It
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
Okay. Yeah, Philip was at a match yesterday and has laryngitis today. So I will say for all of us, good night, folks, and we appreciate you tuning in. If you couldn't stay for the whole thing, listen to the rest of it tomorrow. Don't forget to do all the YouTube and Facebook things, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And we will see you on the next one.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.